So today, I want to discuss something that happened very quietly about 3 weeks ago. It did not make the front page of most Western newspapers. It was not discussed on cable news. But I believe when historians look back at this period, they will point to it as the moment America's entire Middle East strategy began to unravel. And it started with a phone call. In late March 2026, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made a single phone call to his Saudi counterpart, Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. We do not know every word that was said, but we know what happened immediately after. Within days, Saudi Arabia began publicly welcoming Chinese mediation in the Iran war. Within a week, the Gulf Cooperation Council states were praising Beijing's diplomatic efforts. Within 2 weeks, ships were reportedly transiting the Strait of Hormuz not by paying in dollars, but in Yuan. And just like that, the architecture that America has spent 50 years building in the Middle East started cracking at its foundation. Now, I am going to walk you through exactly why this phone call matters so much and what it tells us about where the world is heading. But first, let me show you why the structural forces made this moment inevitable. Because once you understand the underlying logic, you will see that this is not about one phone call at all. It is about the collision of 3 empires, and only one of them understands the game it is actually playing. Okay, so let me explain how I analyze situations like this, because I never want you to just accept what I say. I want you to see the method. I want you to test it yourself. That is what this class has always been about. I use a framework I call predictive history. It rests on 3 pillars. The first pillar is structure. What are the deep, slow-moving forces that constrain what is possible? Geography, demographics, economic systems, trade routes. These things do not change with a news cycle. They change over decades and centuries, and they determine what any player can and cannot do regardless of what they promise. The second pillar is incentives. In game theory, every player maximizes their own interests. So I always ask, what does each player actually want? Not what they say at a press conference, what they actually want. Because those 2 things are almost never the same. The third pillar is historical pattern recognition. History does not repeat exactly, but empires are empires and human beings are human beings. Certain dynamics appear again and again across thousands of years. If you know those patterns, you can watch them unfold in real time. So let me apply all 3 pillars to this situation step by step. Now, let us talk about the players and what they actually want. Because as I always say in this class, the gap between what a government says and what it structurally needs is where the real story lives. What does America say it wants in the Middle East right now? It says it wants to neutralize Iran's nuclear program. It says it wants to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It says it wants peace and stability. Those are the press conference words. What does America actually want? America wants to maintain the petrodollar system. Since 1974, virtually all global oil has been traded in United States dollars. This creates permanent worldwide demand for the dollar. It is what allows America to run enormous budget deficits, to print money without triggering hyperinflation, and to fund the largest military the world has ever seen. Without the petrodollar, America cannot sustain its empire. That is not an opinion. That is arithmetic. So when you see America fighting a war in the Middle East, do not listen to the speeches about democracy or non-proliferation. Ask yourself one question. Does this protect the petrodollar? If the answer is yes, you understand the real motive. Now, what does China say it wants? China says it wants peace. It says it is a neutral mediator. It says it respects sovereignty and opposes interference in other nations' affairs. Those are the diplomatic words. What does China actually want? China wants to become the indispensable economic partner of the Middle East without firing a single bullet. China imports over 10 million barrels of oil per day. It is already the largest trading partner of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. In the first 7 months of 2025 alone, trade between China and the Arab League hit a record $240 billion. China does not need to control the Middle East militarily. It needs to make itself so economically essential that no country in the region can afford to side against it. And here is the thing. That strategy is working. What does Iran want? Iran wants to survive. It has been under American sanctions for decades. It watched Iraq get invaded. It watched Libya get destroyed. It watched Syria get destabilized. Iran's most fundamental goal is survival, but Iran also wants something more. It wants to emerge from this war as a recognized regional power. It wants permanent leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, not just during wartime, but as a structural tool of economic influence. And it wants its allies, Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iraqi militias, protected in any final settlement. And what do the Gulf states want? Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, they want to survive, but they are not strong enough to survive alone. Their entire strategy for 50 years has been to shelter under American military protection. But now something has changed. During this war, Iran hit them. Drones struck oil facilities in Abu Dhabi. A Saudi pipeline was damaged. Kuwait intercepted 28 drone attacks in a single day. And where was America? America was busy trying to protect itself. The Gulf states looked around and realized that the American security umbrella has holes in it. And when your umbrella has holes, you start looking for a second umbrella. That second umbrella is China, okay? So now I have the players and their real interests. Let me walk you through the structural facts, because interests alone do not determine outcomes. Structure does. And the structural realities of this situation are devastating for the American position. Structural fact number 1 of 4. America is spending itself into a military dead end. In the first 72 hours of Operation Epic Fury, the United States Navy launched approximately 400 Tomahawk cruise missiles. That is roughly 10% of its entire ready inventory used in 3 days. America produces about 90 Tomahawk missiles per year. Do the math. Replacing what was used in 3 days will take over 4 years. Meanwhile, Iran fires drones that cost tens of thousands of dollars, and America intercepts them with missiles that cost millions. This cost asymmetry is not new. We discussed it in this class months ago, but now it is playing out in real time, and the numbers are even worse than I predicted. The most powerful military in human history is in a race against its own ammunition supply. Let me say that again because I want it to settle. The arsenal of democracy is running out of arrows. Structural fact number 2 of 4. The Strait of Hormuz has become China's trump card. 20% of the world's oil flows through that narrow waterway. When Iran effectively closed it in early March, something extraordinary happened. Commercial traffic through the strait dropped by more than 90% almost overnight. But not all ships were stopped equally. Reports emerged that some vessels were allowed through, and the price of passage was not dollars. It was yuan. Now this is where most analysts miss the story entirely. They focus on the military dimension, the blockade, the mines, the naval standoff, but the real revolution is financial. For the first time in 50 years, the Strait of Hormuz is being used as a tool to accelerate de-dollarization. Iran is effectively telling the world, you want your oil to flow, pay in the currency of our ally, not our enemy. And China is sitting quietly in Beijing, watching the Yuan gain leverage it could never have achieved through diplomacy alone. Structural fact number 3 of 4. The Gulf states are already hedging. In 2023, Saudi Arabia and China signed a $7 billion currency swap agreement allowing direct settlement between the yuan and the Saudi riyal without using the dollar as an intermediary. China surpassed the United States as Saudi Arabia's largest trading partner back in 2011. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has fallen from 71% in 1999 to roughly 57% today, a 25-year low. These are not predictions. These are facts that were already true before the first bomb fell on Iran. The war has simply accelerated a process that was already underway. And here is the historical parallel that I want you to hold in your mind. In 1956, Britain and France invaded Egypt during the Suez Crisis. They thought they were still great powers. They thought they could project military force in the Middle East without consequences. And then America, which controlled the financial system, simply threatened to dump the British pound. Britain withdrew within weeks. Its empire never recovered. Today, the roles are reversed. America is the fading imperial power trying to hold the Middle East by force, and China is the rising economic power that does not need to fire a shot. It just needs to offer an alternative currency. Structural fact number 4 of 4. The Islamabad talks revealed America's negotiating weakness. On April 11th and 12th, the highest-level meeting between Washington and Tehran since the 1979 revolution took place in Pakistan. A 300-person American delegation led by Vice President Vance met a 70-person Iranian delegation led by Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf. They talked for 21 hours. They agreed on most points of Iran's 10-point framework, but they could not agree on two issues: the nuclear program and control of the Strait of Hormuz. The talks collapsed, and within hours, Trump announced a naval blockade of all Iranian ports. Here is what that tells you about America's position. When you are winning, you negotiate from strength. When you are losing, you issue ultimatums. The blockade is not a sign of power. It is a sign of desperation. America is trying to achieve through economic strangulation what it could not achieve through 40 days of bombing. So now I have the structure. I have the players and their real interests. Let me give you the prediction. And I want to present this carefully because the situation is more complex than most commentators acknowledge. I believe this war resolves along one of three paths, and which path it takes depends on one critical variable: how China plays the next 60 days. Let me walk through each scenario. Scenario 1, China brokers a grand bargain. In this scenario, Beijing uses its unique position as Iran's largest economic partner and as a major trading partner of the Gulf states to negotiate a comprehensive settlement that America cannot. China offers Iran reconstruction investment and long-term oil purchase agreements denominated in Yuan. It offers the Gulf states security guarantees through economic interdependence rather than military bases. It offers America a face-saving exit by framing the deal as a multilateral achievement. In this scenario, China becomes the dominant diplomatic power in the Middle East without deploying a single soldier. America withdraws, claiming it achieved its objectives. The petrodollar does not die overnight, but it begins bleeding from a wound that will not heal. I consider this the most likely outcome within 12 to 18 months. Scenario 2, the blockade escalates into a direct confrontation. Trump's naval blockade of Iranian ports is an act of war under international law. If a Chinese-flagged vessel approaches the strait carrying Iranian oil, does the United States Navy stop it? If it does, that is a direct military confrontation between two nuclear powers over a trade route. If it does not, the blockade is exposed as a bluff. This is the scenario that keeps Pentagon planners awake at night. And here is the counterintuitive twist. China may actually want America to try to stop a Chinese vessel. Because the moment the United States fires on or boards a Chinese ship, Beijing gains the moral authority to openly arm Iran, to accelerate de-dollarization, and to rally the entire global South against what it will call American piracy. Think about that for a moment. The trap is not military, it is diplomatic, and America may not even see it coming. Scenario 3, a frozen conflict and slow American withdrawal. In this scenario, neither side achieves a decisive outcome. The ceasefire holds loosely but is violated constantly. The Strait of Hormuz operates at reduced capacity. Oil prices remain elevated. The global economy suffers. And over months and years, America gradually reduces its military footprint in the region because the cost, in dollars, in political capital, in strategic attention diverted from the Pacific, becomes unsustainable. This is the Vietnam model. Not a single dramatic defeat, but a slow bleed that eventually makes withdrawal the only rational choice. Iran emerges battered but standing. The Gulf states complete their pivot toward China, and the Middle East settles into a new order where economic power, not military power, determines who controls the region. Now, let me address the questions I know many of you are asking. Question 1. Is China really powerful enough to reshape the Middle East? I am going to be very direct. Yes. And the reason is simple. China does not need to reshape the Middle East through force. It needs to reshape it through trade. China buys more oil from the region than any other country. It is building ports, railways, and digital infrastructure across the Gulf. It offers investment without lectures about human rights or demands for regime change. For the Gulf states, China is the partner that gives them what they want without asking for what they cannot give. The math simply does not work for America anymore. You cannot be the dominant power in a region where you are no longer the dominant customer. Question 2. Will the ceasefire hold? I am confident that neither side wants a return to full-scale war right now. Iran needs time to rebuild. America needs time to replenish its weapons stockpiles. But the ceasefire is not peace. It is a pause. And during that pause, the structural shifts I have described, the rise of the Yuan in oil trade, the Gulf states hedging toward China, Iran's consolidation as a regional power, all of these continue. The ceasefire is not freezing the situation. It is allowing the new order to solidify while everyone pretends the old order still exists. Question 3. What does this mean for ordinary people? It means higher energy prices for at least the next year. It means inflation in food and fertilizer, because the Middle East produces both. It means a global economy that is more fragile, more divided, and more dependent on decisions made in Beijing than in Washington. And I believe this deeply. It means the end of the unipolar moment. The world that existed from 1991 to roughly 2025, where one country set the rules and everyone else followed, that world is over. What replaces it is still being decided, and the Middle East is where it is being decided right now. Let me bring this together with one final thought. In the spring of 1947, the British Empire informed the United States that it could no longer afford to support Greece and Turkey against Soviet pressure. Britain was bankrupt, its military was overstretched, its currency was collapsing, and so it handed the responsibility to America. That moment, quiet and undramatic, was the true end of the British Empire and the beginning of the American century. I believe we are living through a similar moment right now. America is not collapsing. I want to be clear about that. America remains enormously powerful, but it can no longer afford to be the sole guarantor of security in every region of the world simultaneously. And the Middle East, the region that has consumed more American blood and treasure than any other over the past 50 years, is the place where that reality is becoming undeniable. China understood this before anyone else. That phone call from Wang Yi to his Saudi counterpart was not a random diplomatic gesture. It was the sound of a new power quietly picking up the burden that the old power can no longer carry. And once you hear it, once you see the structural logic behind it, you cannot unhear it. Now, this is not prophecy. This is game theory and structural history applied to the most volatile region on Earth. I might be wrong. The situation is fluid. New variables could emerge that change everything. And if I am wrong, we will come back and we will analyze why. Because that is what this class is about. Not certainty, not ideology, just careful thinking, honest analysis, and the courage to follow the logic wherever it leads.